Hey everyone, this is Jason Vaughn with Life After the Before Photo. The video you're about to see was meant to be part of an entire tour of the Houston Museum of Fine Art, but instead, this exhibit is so excellent. I really wanted to spend time on it, and I think you're going to love it. I love the optimism of the American future and what we can be, even if we have not lived up to it at all times, that Norman Rockwell shows in most of his paintings. And so I just hope you'll watch this, enjoy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be back in the future with a full showing of the museum. Again, thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, I know you guys were excited for this. I love it. I love these. This is the Rockwell exhibit. You see these little things here, I'm able to listen and do a guided tour that way of each painting. So we actually start off here with a painting. This is actually a self-portrait of Rockwell. And you can see he's actually painting the Saturday Evening Post, which was his primary job. And you see he's kind of the horror of a blank canvas there, and he's trying to figure out what to paint there, but and looks quite befuddled with drawings all around him, etc. And then see he was actually gifted to a friend. But and here you have the due date. As he's waiting for this. This is in 1938. And then we come over here, and this is in 1944 during World War II, which actually you see the rationing. This is actually a really cool painting because you can see this is the completed side of it, but you can actually go in and see kind of his work in progress because this is the uncompleted side. If you look here at this chair, this is the beginning stages. You look at their faces, there's almost no detail. But then you find this chair here just has immaculate detail in the wood grain and everything about it. And then the faces are very clear. During World War II, this is a volunteer community rationing where you actually see the people of the community coming together. And so what he would do he would start with a photograph or take a or start with a chalk drawing or charcoal drawing, and then ultimately to create a finished drawing. And then here you actually see the completed drawing, though it adds a couple of different things here. For instance, you see the umbrella that's actually open here, and the other gentleman sitting to the side, possibly Rockwell himself, I'm not sure. But then you can see how much clearer the details got for the rest of this painting and the illustration. Over here we have one from a barbershop quartet from 1936. We're in the midst of the Great Depression. We're about 6 years in, and so Rockwell he kind of talked about the simple joys of life, and so he portrays here the barbershop quartet. And actually, this gentleman is Walter Beach, who is one of his fellow artists. And you can see half of his face is covered in shaving cream. But then you come down here to what's he reading? It's a gentleman's magazine of the day. So I think he was poking a little fun at his friend there with the Police Gazette. It was Playboy, but only with the stories, or maybe a few illustrations. Over here you have men talking about the war news. This is actually them talking about the planned invasion of Normandy, and it's actually an uncompleted, because you can see this is the newspaper here. It never actually got completed because he ended up moving on to men charting war maneuvers. For the illustration he was trying to show. He couldn't really make out. I think he kind of decided he couldn't really portray everything here. You don't really know exactly what they're discussing, but Again, you see this was ultimately gifted, and there's the name there. So about a year after the 1929 crash, Norman Rockwell was actually an avid traveler. Besides art, it was one of the things he loved to do. I think that I really connect with him on that love of travel. And so you see here this family, they're just coming back from a very exciting vacation. The mom is absolutely exhausted. The kid's exhausted. You see some really fun things from their travel. You see down here, you have the camera that obviously caught and captured so many of their adventures, their suitcase. You see a bouquet of flowers here with some of them on his hat. And then you see a bucket and pail for, obviously they've spent some time at the beach. And then a deflated balloon and this little frog here who is trying to escape the box. I don't know if he ever made it out or not. This was at the beginning of the, really still at the beginning of the Great Depression. We're a year in after the crash. And so it ultimately, he starts to change a little bit. And while he's still portraying vacation, you see a very bored teller here. As you can see, there's not much going on. You can tell that he's not seen a lot of customers recently. No one's going on vacation at this point. Actually, in the midst of this, between these two, this is 1937, you see Rockwell actually took a vacation to Paris to try to gain some inspiration for his art. But probably part of the reason we don't see more French influences, a few months in, he actually had to come back because his wife was pregnant with their second child. And they were all on vacation together, but wanted to get back to America. This is another great piece. I love this. This reminds me of this is what I picture my great-grandmother being. I don't think she was ever this fancy, but 1934, you see this woman. She is probably looks a little well off, but she is arguing and she is giving it to him. You get these assertive women in some of his portraits, but she's like, I will give you one. He's like, no, two. And this is a little coffee pot here. And I think she won. I think she won this debate here. But then you see some other things other items down here, probably things he probably kept in his office for the fashion of the day and probably to help him draw some of these items. These were probably from items you actually found in his office. Here you have some children playing marbles. Again, you see a very this girl just looks like she is taking these boys to task. She is winning this game. And then you see a young man with, I love this, a little Jughead type Archie hat. But this was yet another cover of the Saturday Evening Post. We see here how some other artists actually take on the same era as Rockwell, and starting with the Great Depression, moving on to World War II, etc. Some of these are graphite, some of them are photographs. The name of this one is, There Was a Time, Mopey, When Being in a Bread Line Was Sort of Exclusive. The title of this one is, this little girl here is telling her when mother says, would you like some more? Say no, because there's actually very little left for her. These are by Wortman. Baby health station closed. You've got government bonds being sold here, but then you also have a gentleman begging out front. And then here we have women at manufacturing now. So we're moving into the war period. Migrant workers waiting to be paid after work. This is one of my favorite pieces by Hugh Hutton. This was in the Philadelphia Inquirer. As you can see here, Poland lying as though dead, and the Nazis and the USSR communists waiting to pick at the bones. Unfortunately, some of this mindset has come back into our politics. This is a Dorothy Lang photograph picturing a pea picker named Florence Thompson. She is actually the mother of 7 children. You see 3 here in the photograph, and she is just devastated by the crop failures during this time, during the Great Depression, and so you see her with the children, but yet you see a great dignity about her, I think, while also seeing her concern and worry for her children. I think this is a great capturing photo of the moment. After seeing this photograph, apparently the government actually sent 20,000 pounds of food to this camp. Shows you the power of the medium here and just how much emotion is captured in this photograph. This is a piece Norman Rockwell did for the Army, wanting to make sure they gave them all of the food, ammunition, everything they needed, and get it to them on time. Obviously, getting people supplies is actually the reason we won. If you look at the history, and the actual German soldiers were better trained, better individual soldiers, but our supply chain, our command, our intelligence is what won that war. It was the group as a whole rather than the individual soldier. Here we see a different sort of depiction of that famous Iwo Jima, possibly, I think they say it was stage photograph of the Marines raising the flag. They had a smaller flag, and then they decided that a larger flag needed to go up. So here you see that smaller one being taken down and the larger one raised. But you're not getting that iconic angle that we know of as of Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. Here is one of the only known existing photos to show the attack on Pearl Harbor as it happens, and have people in it. Obviously, there was no official photographer. You didn't have today, like where everybody had their phones in their pocket and cameras to be able to capture this. And it's actually unknown who did this. It was they captured this photograph with just happened to have it out in time. You actually see the USS Shaw exploding in the background. And over here beside it, you see a photo by W. Eugene Smith capturing a soldier. This one is not stage, but it almost looks stage. But you see him as he takes that drink from his campaign, that refreshing moment. They didn't know who it was at the time, but it was actually a Greek stowaway who had, at 16, stowed away on a ship to come to America. And he ended up joining the war effort because volunteers were able to get citizenship, and actually did 12 to 13 tours so he could get his citizenship and become a United States citizen. So here you see one of the oil paintings of Willie Gillis. This is him in church. You can see the hymnal beside him. Willie Gillis was not an actual soldier. He was built, shaped after someone, but he was actually the model was only 15 years old at the time. But this is a series Rockwell did between 41 and 42 primarily, but then actually came back to it a little bit later, and 44 as well. So you see, he liked to depict soldiers, and not necessarily in battle as you saw so many artists do, but you saw them depicted in more normal situations. Here you see Willie Gillis in a convoy. So you see soldiers smoking and sleeping and eating, not necessarily in battle. And here you can actually see a rabbit's foot around his neck. And then over here you have this one where he's getting food. This is a nice humorous one. He's getting a food package, but you see the soldiers' faces around him. They're like looking on as to waiting for the moment they might get to try a little bit of something that you see there. Here's the more of the series. You see this is October 4th, 41, February. The one in the convoy is actually was never published. And then here you see him, the Fighting Gillises, which is him and the rest of his family going back many generations. Obviously all made up, but quite the amusing, oh, look at these books. I didn't even notice these. You see Family Genealogy, Victory with Gillis, A History of the United States and the Gillis Family, Gillis at Gettysburg, Gillis and Lincoln, the Gillis Legends. So, quite interesting. I don't think this one is Willie Gillis. You see him coming back from war, getting ready to go back into the workforce. So one of the most iconic pieces that really inspired FDR, and this is actually not one of his pieces, this is Daniel Stern, but was FDR's The Four Freedoms, which was something he presented in 1941 before the world was at war, but America was not yet at war. And so the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, these were the four freedoms that he kind of based everything around. You actually see here is this is a comic book that was created by an unknown American on the life of FDR. And here you can actually explore the comic in English. I think I'm on. There you go. Very well done. This was really at the beginning of the age of comic books. I mean, Superman had only been created a few years before this. Here we can see the thing. This was the cover of Boy's Life that Rockwell did when they were going to have a 100th anniversary celebration of the Boy Scouts. It was going to be a national jamboree, and Roosevelt actually helped was encouraging everyone to come to the nation's capital for this. Unfortunately, an outbreak of infant paralysis, as we know today as polio, ended up canceling the event, which is interesting because obviously today we're dealing with a outbreak of of the coronavirus, where we are seeing events canceled. But so far, nothing like a national event like this. This ultimately was held in 1937 instead of 1935. Some of Rockwell's most iconic pieces we see here, and these are actually all war bonds paintings, but freedom of speech, freedom of worship. One of the most iconic is we portray it often at Thanksgiving, but it was actually published in March. This is the freedom from want and freedom from fear. I described it earlier as freedom of peace, but freedom of. And then you see, as he has a paper here of a bombing, and the child's toys at their feet. These are the details I love about Rockwell. Here we actually get to see the original oil paintings that he did. Each according to the dictates of his own conscience, the freedom of worship. In this painting, you actually see this is his friends and family that are featured here. The woman presenting is the family cook, Miss Thaddeus Wheaton. And then you come down here, this woman right here is actually his wife, Mary Barstow Rockwell. And then this lady over here is actually his mother, Nancy Hill Rockwell. So I believe that's supposed to be him down here in the corner. Here's another painting of the freedom of speech at a town hall meeting. And you can see the same gentleman, but Rockwell was so meticulous, he actually used an actual jacket to show that. Here's that jacket that he showed. Now, when he was done with the Four Freedoms, he actually came back to working at the Post. This one is the Saturday Evening Post. You'll see this one. If you remember earlier, the men discussing war plans, this is what he turned that into instead, was man charting war maneuvers. I thought it was a better depiction. You see the gentleman with several small photographs. You see that. You can see that there, probably of his own children in the military, and then General Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur as well. This was actually, with the little cat at his feet, this was actually given to Pete and Don Miller, the staff at the Eagle. I'm kind of wondering if Pete is one of the cats, but and then the Berkshire Eagle is there, portrayed as a newspaper. Now, as you can see, even while he was back at the Saturday Evening Post, he is portraying soldiers. And this is a tattoo artist, but as you can tell, it kind of looks very much like Rockwell himself from the earlier portrait we saw. And in the background is a bunch of different tattoos, and then the soldier is celebrating all of his conquests, I guess, of lovers in different ports. This is my favorite one. The second one, the one that's just been scratched out, Single, which I just wonder if he was actually just single there. Maybe that was one he did not have as much luck with the ladies. And over here we have the 1945 Thanksgiving poster, and you see a man coming home, sitting with his mother. The chair's a little bit smaller, like similar to a child's chair even. Maybe something as he's coming home, you see he's still in uniform, but yet he's already moved into his civilian shoes. Just simple things signifying that the war is close to an end. You probably remember this iconic Coca-Cola ad. This is, 1931 during the Great Depression. You didn't see, Rockwell didn't enjoy doing advertising as much as he did magazines, but they paid very well comparatively. And so he actually did worked for 150 different institutions and corporations. Here you see a young man during the Great Depression just taking a simple time after he's done fishing to go, you see even his little stub toe there, but taking time for a sandwich and a Coca-Cola, the simple things in life, even during hard times. Here we see more of his covers for the Saturday Evening Post, 1933. These are all the baby ones. Okay. And this one right here is probably the most heart-wrenching. A baby in a gas mask in 1940. Is Russia winning China too? Wow. I'm sorry, these are not Rockwell. I apologize. These are J.C. Leyendecker, who was another Saturday Evening Post artist. And these are all his these are all Baby New Year. Goes on with Baby New Year. The baby trying to get the stocks back up on the budget. Again, war. An iron fist, wish me luck. Wow. No trespassing. Oh, this is actually a depiction of Central America. And then, obviously, the Nazis. Here is another Saturday Evening Post artist named Mead Schaefer. His portrayal of the war, as you can tell, quite different than Rockwell's. He's actually portraying them in combat. Here's a medic trying to get blood and to a soldier. Naval Lookout. This one almost looks like just a photograph. I mean, the proficiency here is astounding. And a paratrooper. What's interesting is these actually are here in Texas. They're all from the United Services Automobile Association. Here we have one by John Falter. It's called By His Deeds, Measure Yours. You see that the line has has been torn down, looking like a cross here on the side. You see the cuts in his hands, looking as though the nails of Christ. You see the same over here. And then you see as though a crown of thorns around his head. This one was by Thomas Leah, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I apologize, called The 2,000-Yard Stare. And obviously you're just immediately drawn to the eyes here. You see in the background other soldiers, and then planes overhead. I believe they'd just been bombed. He was a war correspondent and artist. Here we see some propaganda photos. If you remember, the Chinese were actually not communist before the attacks in World War II, and actually they were being attacked by Japan, and part of this is what led to the communists coming in later and taking over. We see here a Nazi nightmare with swastikas. This is by Boris. He's an American born in Russia. Witches' Sabbath. Here's Ben Shahn, an American born in Lithuania. Nazi brutality. It's about all the men being put to death. And then here it portrays the French. He was known as a social realist. Heading into the 50s and especially the early 60s, we see a great transition into a little bit more darker side, but yet an optimistic side. It still contains study that's still optimism of Rockwell, where he's become very engaged with the civil rights movement of the time and what's going on around him. Here we see him portray the trial of Lincoln. It's called Lincoln for the Defense, and portraying him as he defended William Duff Armstrong. This was a trial where the man, they said that he was, they could tell who he was by the moonlight, but yet using an almanac, Lincoln showed that there was no moonlight that evening, and ultimately the man was set free. We come over here and we see what's the most striking image for Rockwell I've seen in this exhibit, in my opinion, and the most heartbreaking. This is Murder in Mississippi, and it portrays the death of Michael Shortner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman, who were murdered by the KKK in Philadelphia, Mississippi. This was commissioned for Look, and this was the completed piece. As you can see, almost no color except for the blood and a very dark background, and then you see the KKK just with their hoods just as shadows. They thought this was a little too graphic, and so they actually went with the study piece he did here. And so this was more of a sketch that Look published. Another one he'd done for Look that shares that same mindset is Blood Brothers. This is the original piece. It was created in light of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and the unrest that was going on. And then, but Look asked them to actually put them in Vietnam uniforms. And so you see them here instead, reaching out for their helmets. Ultimately, Look decided not to publish either of these as they were considered too controversial at the time. Here we see Christmas Eve in Bethlehem, which is a piece that he was actually standing on a hotel as you watch the processional go forth. One of the interesting things here is you actually not only see people of Christian faith and then obviously there's folks of Jewish faith, but you see people of the Muslim faith as well. A very optimistic photo. One of the things that Rockwell loved was the Peace Corps. So you see here, this is the fifth, in remembrance of the 5th anniversary of the Peace Corps. You see the portrayal of JFK here, which was actually based on one of the a photographer, Jacques Lowe's photograph from the campaign, which was the official campaign photograph. But then these are actual volunteers portrayed of the Peace Corps. Another piece he did was called The Right to Know. He'd actually been published. They wanted him to do a piece to encourage people to a recruitment photo for Vietnam, and he just told them his heart wasn't in it, so he couldn't do it. So what the piece he actually ended up working on was this, called The Right to Know, which was for Look magazine again. And you see the people here standing before an empty chair meant to represent their government, as they wanted to know the reasons for the government's actions. This actually didn't end up getting published. This actually ended up being, the Pentagon Papers actually came out right before this was released. Here we go to the UN with people, again, from all nations, and a portrayal during the height of the Cold War. We see the Security Council here with British Ambassador Sir Gladwin Jebb, U.S. Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge, and Soviet ambassadors Valerian Alexandrikov Zorin. Pictured here. It's actually quite a large painting, and you can see the UN flag there. You see Vietnam people. I mean, I'm not sure. I guess that would be before Vietnam, but people starving, people with food, praying, looking on. Again, you continue to see this family. The portrayal here of these. This is the white family, I guess you would say, that he uses in many of his paintings. You'll see it in the next one as well, and on the same pose. And then you see the soldiers and people from all faiths praying here. After traveling in 1955, his idea was that all faiths have one thing in common, that the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And this is an oil painting, but you see, again, as I said, that family there, same pose, with people of all faiths coming together. Again, you see very similar to the children with the bowls as well. And one of his obviously most iconic paintings, The Problem We All Live With, which is the portrayal of Ruby Bridges as she was walked to school in the all-white New Orleans school. You can see she is very confident, even though the N-word is portrayed behind her. You see tomatoes thrown. And for this, he actually had commissioned white dresses so he could actually study them. Here's one of 3 he had commissioned. Here's me, folks. And you see the portraits he used to actually show. This is actually his neighbor, Linda Gunn, who ended up being the final portrayal there. You can see some more shots there. Now let's go on, and this is the end of the exhibit here, which is the reimagining of the 4 freedoms. This was done in 2018 between January and May. Several artists got together and called some photo shoots. And you can see there the different more modern retellings of this. Here, people of many different, obviously in the 50s, 40s, 30s, almost everyone was white in the portrayal. So we have a much more diverse portrayal here, even with Freedom from Fear being portrayed down here by a gay couple. Here are some larger prints of these. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Let's see, what is this? Middle East indifferent over sanctions. So that is the Rockwell exhibit. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Again, guys, I hope you loved that exhibit as much as I did. I actually didn't even make it through the rest of the museum. After that, I spent so much time at that exhibit, but I'll be going back to film the rest of it and show you guys the general admission for it and some other exhibits that are going on at the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. Remember that, excuse me, it's not the coronavirus. I hope. But go to, that one's there until March 22nd if you want to see the Norman Rockwell exhibit here in Houston at the Museum of Art. And again, please like, subscribe, share this video. I really appreciate you guys, and I will see you soon.